The diplomatic atmosphere in Tehran is currently characterized by a high degree of complexity and uncertainty regarding the proposed negotiations in Islamabad. Observers on the ground indicate that there is no immediate or clear intention from the Iranian leadership to occupy a seat at the negotiating table. This reluctance persists despite a significant increase in high-level diplomatic activity observed over the previous 24 hours. The Iranian Foreign Minister, Abbas Araghchi, has been engaged in intensive communication with his counterpart in Pakistan. Records indicate that 2 separate phone calls took place between the 2 officials within a very short period. During the most recent exchange, Araghchi articulated a firm stance regarding the prerequisites for any meaningful diplomatic engagement. The Iranian administration has identified 2 primary obstacles that prevent them from joining the peace process at this stage. First, the use of threatening rhetoric by international actors is viewed as a significant barrier to constructive dialogue. Second, the recent series of kinetic attacks on commercial vessels is seen as a fundamental disruption to the regional security framework. While the current situation remains deadlocked, some analysts suggest that the position of the Iranian government could shift in the coming hours. The fluid nature of the crisis means that diplomatic intentions are subject to rapid change based on emerging developments. For now, however, the official stance remains one of cautious observation rather than active participation in the Islamabad summit, and the focus of international concern has shifted toward the Strait of Hormuz, which remains the most critical sticking point in the ongoing dispute. The maritime corridor has become the site of intense military and political posturing between the United States and Iran. This tension reached a new peak following reports of a specific incident involving an Iranian cargo vessel. The United States Navy recently conducted an operation to board and seize an Iranian cargo ship within the vicinity of the strait. This action has been characterized as a significant escalation that has made the naval blockade even more sensitive. Iranian officials have responded with a series of statements reflecting the gravity of the perceived provocation. Esmail Baghai, the spokesperson for the Iranian Foreign Ministry, has been vocal in condemning the naval interception. His sentiments were echoed by the Qatam al-Anbiya headquarters, which serves as a central command for the Iranian armed forces. The rhetoric emerging from these institutions suggests that the possibility of a military retaliation is being seriously considered. The commander of the Qatam al-Anbiya headquarters noted that a retaliatory strike had been considered within the last 24 hours. However, the decision to execute such an attack was reportedly withheld due to humanitarian considerations. The presence of the families of crew members on the vessel led the Iranian forces to prioritize the avoidance of civilian injuries. This delicate balance between military posturing and the protection of non-combatants underscores the intricate nature of the crisis. Any further escalation or de-escalation in the strait is expected to unfold within the next few hours. The international community is closely monitoring the movements of both naval forces to gauge the likelihood of a direct confrontation. China has entered the diplomatic arena by issuing a formal criticism of the United States' actions in the Strait of Hormuz. The Chinese government expressed concern over the forced interception and seizure of the Iranian cargo ship that occurred on Sunday. This public stance reflects Beijing's interest in maintaining regional stability and the free flow of global trade. The Chinese Foreign Ministry has urged all involved parties to take advantage of what they describe as a window for peace. They have called for a restoration of the normal flow of maritime traffic to prevent further economic disruption. The official statement emphasized the need for responsible conduct and adherence to existing ceasefire agreements. In their communication, Chinese officials noted that the situation in the strait is both sensitive and complex. They expressed a hope that the parties concerned would avoid actions that aggravate confrontation or escalate existing tensions. Creating the necessary conditions for the restoration of normal passage is seen by Beijing as a top priority for international security. Simultaneously, the foreign ministers of Iran and Russia have held a high-level phone call to discuss the status of the regional ceasefire. Moscow has reported that Iran provided assurances regarding the safety of Russian interests in the region. Specifically, Iran confirmed its commitment to ensuring the uninterrupted passage of Russian ships and cargo through the Strait of Hormuz. Marco Vicenzino, a geopolitical risk specialist based in New York, has provided an analytical perspective on the Iranian strategy. He suggests that while Iran may appear reluctant to negotiate, this posture is a calculated strategic choice. The reality, according to Vicenzino, is that Iran likely desires a negotiated settlement, but refuses to be perceived as acting from a position of weakness. In the realm of international diplomacy, optics and perceptions are often as important as the substance of the talks themselves. Iran is particularly concerned about how its actions are viewed by its domestic population, and the broader international community. Demonstrating a sense of strength and independence is a core component of their current diplomatic maneuvers. Vicenzino describes the Iranian reluctance as being transactional and strategic, rather than emotional, or purely obstructive. By adopting a gradual and methodical approach, Tehran aims to invite key international actors to serve as mediators. This strategy allows the Iranian leadership to make concessions without appearing to capitulate to external pressure. The involvement of a major power like China is seen as a vital component of this face-saving strategy. China can provide the necessary diplomatic off-ramps, and help facilitate a climb down for all parties involved. This mediation is essential for Iran to manage its internal and external image while pursuing its broader strategic objectives. By prolonging the process and taking a slow route toward the negotiating table, Iran is also attempting to expand the scope of the talks. Their goal is to move the conversation beyond the singular focus on the nuclear agenda. They seek to include discussions on the lifting of economic sanctions and the provision of long-term security guarantees. This long-game approach requires a high degree of patience, and a willingness to withstand short-term pressure. However, the success of this strategy depends heavily on whether the United States and its allies possess a similar level of strategic patience. There is a persistent risk that the clock may run out, leading to a return to major hostilities. The nuclear issue remains the most significant and difficult obstacle to a comprehensive resolution. Over the years, various proposals have been put forward to address the international community's concerns regarding Iran's nuclear program. One such proposal involved the transfer of Iranian nuclear material to Russia for secure storage. This specific Russian proposal was originally discussed during the era of the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, often referred to as the Obama deal. Although it was raised again recently, the United States government reportedly rejected the arrangement. This highlights the difficulty of reviving past solutions in a significantly changed geopolitical environment. As the situation evolves, it is becoming increasingly clear that this is not a conflict that will be resolved quickly. It is a long-term diplomatic challenge that will require sustained effort from all major global powers. The question of whether armed force will once again be employed remains a central concern for regional stability. Iran must remain cognizant of the fact that the international community's patience is not infinite. Underestimating the resolve of the American side could lead to a miscalculation with severe consequences. Therefore, the role of strategic partners who can facilitate the process is more important than ever. China is increasingly seen as the actor with the most significant leverage in this specific context. The Chinese government possesses substantial resources, and maintains a deep economic connection with Iran. As the primary purchaser of Iranian energy resources, China has a vested interest in ensuring that the regional supply chain remains functional. The Chinese style of diplomacy, which is often reserved and conducted behind the scenes, is well suited for this crisis. By using calibrated rhetoric and quiet mediation, Beijing can help de-escalate the situation without forcing any party to lose face. This role is expected to become even more prominent if the initial diplomatic efforts in Islamabad fail to yield results. It is noteworthy that the Pakistani foreign minister met with his Chinese counterpart shortly before the current round of tensions began. This meeting supports the theory that China is actively working behind the scenes to coordinate a diplomatic response. Their involvement is driven by a clear economic necessity to protect global trade routes. For many nations, the Strait of Hormuz is not just a geographical point, but a vital artery for the global economy. China, acting as the world's primary assembly line, is heavily dependent on the energy that flows through the Middle East. Any prolonged closure of the strait would have a devastating impact on their domestic economy and global trade. The Chinese leadership has initially allowed the Pakistani-led process to take the lead in the negotiations. However, if this path does not produce tangible results within the coming days or weeks, a more direct Chinese intervention is likely. They will seek to prevent a return to major hostilities that could destabilize the entire global economic system. When assessing the prospects for a resolution, experts suggest a framework of realism, rather than simple optimism or pessimism. It is essential to maintain a sober and checked set of expectations regarding the timeline for peace. This conflict did not begin in the last few weeks, it is the result of decades of accumulated tension. The events that took place on February 28 are merely one chapter in a much longer and more complex history. Issues that have taken years or even decades to manifest cannot be expected to disappear in a matter of days. A long and difficult process lies ahead for all the diplomats and leaders involved in the crisis. The participation of all major powers is required to prevent a vicious downward cycle in the global economy. The threat of major hostilities remains a shadow over the region, and the stakes for the international community could not be higher. Every diplomatic move is being weighed against the potential for a broader and more destructive conflict. In Tehran, the rhetoric remains firm, but the underlying reality of the economic and military pressure is undeniable. The Iranian leadership must navigate a path that satisfies domestic hardliners, while avoiding a total collapse of the diplomatic options. This balancing act is being performed under the watchful eyes of the entire world. The coming days will be critical in determining whether the window for peace remains open, or if the region will descend further into confrontation. The international community continues to call for restraint and a return to the principles of international law. Whether these calls will be heeded by the primary protagonists in the strait remains to be seen. As the sun sets over the Persian Gulf, the naval vessels of multiple nations remain in close proximity, creating a volatile environment. The potential for a small tactical error to escalate into a major strategic conflict is a constant concern for military commanders. Diplomacy remains the only viable path to ensuring the long-term security of the world's most important maritime choke point. The narrative of this crisis is still being written, with each phone call and public statement adding a new layer of the complexity. For the people of the region and the global economy, the hope is that strategic realism will eventually prevail over the impulse for escalation. The journey toward a stable and secure Middle East continues to be a long and arduous one.